We getting the first big earnings reports of the season, Pepsi and Delta. They've set a high bar for their sectors, raising their guidance as consumers continue to shell out. Can the trend continue? Brad, you talked to the Delta CEO, of course. He seems skeptical that other sectors and companies would be able to clear the bar that Delta set.
The earnings season is going to be a little choppy. I think you're going to see some industries, some consumer-facing industries that principally, whether it's retail or home improvement or potentially in the cargo world, where you're going to see some difficulty. You're going to find other industries that are service-oriented, that are providing opportunities that customers haven't had the time because of the pandemic to exploit and to utilize. And I think you're going to find some mixed messages here.
And he also said that earnings season could be choppy. Joining us now, Lee Ferridge, head of macro strategy for North America at State Street. Lee, when you look across the earnings season, is there a particular company or sector that you look to sort of set the tone or be emblematic or a bellwether of what we're going to hear overall?
Not really from my perspective. I look at it from a macro point of view. I'm a macro strategist, so I'm looking for clues about the consumer. Is the consumer still strong? Do companies think they're going to stay strong, as we just heard from Delta? I'm also looking at, are they struggling to hire people? What's happening on the wages front? The labour market is key in all of this for me, so I want any clues I can hear on the labour market from them. And then finally on prices. Are they facing still rising prices for their input costs? And are they able to pass them on? Are they confident about passing them on? Those are the things I'm looking at, particularly labour market, particularly on prices, and then overall strength of the consumer, and what they project going forward is really important for me from a macro perspective.
Could one of the other themes or bellwethers be what companies don't say or don't lean into with regard to what we heard from bank CEOs last quarter saying Q3 2023 recession's on? That's what we're forecasting. That's what we had been knowing to expect because of what they had said back then. If we get any type of different tone or commentary, does that kind of lift the markets on the easing of some of those pressures, or at least the thought of a Q3 2023 recession?
Yeah, I think it does. And I think you will see less talk of recession in this earnings season. We've already heard, you mentioned Delta and PepsiCo, right? The two of them have come out and talked about a strong consumer, talked about a strong outlook going forward. If we get more of that and less talk of recession, that's got to lift the mood in the market for sure. The problem with it is, though, everyone's looking at it from that side and everyone's talking soft landing. If we don't have a meaningful slowdown, how does inflation come down? It was a good number yesterday, but we're still at 4.8% core inflation. We still have very strong wage growth. If the economy stays strong and doesn't slow, how do we get inflation to 2%? And that's what's going to be troubling the Fed.
Yes, that is a conundrum, to be sure. We're going to talk more about that in a moment, but just to sort of continue the earnings conversation, do you think going into the season it is a low bar that companies will be able to easily go over, or a high bar that'll be more difficult for them to achieve?
It's a good question. I mean, I would have said a month ago it was a low bar, but now, given the price moves we've seen over the last month, I think there's a lot of good news baked into the price now. So that bar has definitely gone up. And I think, I wouldn't disagree with the Delta CEO saying it's going to be a mixed bag. You're going to see some very good results like theirs, but then you're probably going to see some disappointing ones as well. Overall, I think the message is going to be one of resilience. I think overall the earnings season will be good. But I think I would agree. I think there's going to be some big winners and losers, and the bar is much higher than it was a month ago.
And that resiliency, from your perspective, also carries through to the consumer as well?
That's right. Yeah, most definitely. I mean, we're still seeing that in the consumer.
Interesting. And then just to kind of add on to that and go further with how different companies are talking about their consumer, there's, of course, the individual consumer or the household, but there's also their engagements with other businesses, too, who have looked across either their cost restructuring over the past year and even where they're spending on some of the applications, software, systems, tools like that. Are we set to see that flip this earnings season where companies are talking about other businesses having more of a propensity to spend on some of the things that are going to help shore up cybersecurity or shore up their, internal collaborations even?
I think that's a really good question, because that will tell us a lot about company confidence on the economy going forward. Because that's the sort of thing you spend money on if you're confident about the outlook. If you think we're going into recession, you're not spending money on that stuff. You're pulling back on those sort of costs. But that will be a really interesting bellwether of the whole thing. Are they spending money on that sort of ancillary sort of investment that is a sign of real confidence going forward? And even if they say they're confident, if they're not spending on that, maybe that's a sign that they're not as confident as they say they are.